Movie tie-in games typically have a bad rap, and for good reason. Envisioned less as complementary works and more like merchandise, the teams behind these not only have to work within strict limitations, but also within just as strict deadlines. And as such, it's no surprise that even when handed to veteran developers, they end up average at best. There are some exceptions, however, and Enter the Matrix is, for the most part, one of these. Developed by Shiny Entertainment and released in 2003 for all major platforms, should you enter the Matrix or stay far, far away. In Enter the Matrix, you play as either Niobe or Ghost, the crew members of the Logos, as they set out to defend Zion against the machines, together with the rest of the fleet. The game's story ties into critical moments of The Matrix Reloaded, giving the backstory to many important events in the film. Newcomers to the franchise are going to be left confused by the story, however, as the game expects a decent knowledge of the universe, as it drops you in the middle of things without even the slightest hint on what's going on exactly. And even if you know the major plot points, the narrative is still on fast forward, requiring your uninterrupted attention for decent comprehension. Still, it is interesting enough to keep you going, and if nothing else, the live-action cinematics shot specifically for the game, not to mention the movie clips, do give it good production values. Regardless of chosen character, Enter the Matrix plays mostly the same, with the main differences being that some levels are exclusive to one character, and that whenever there's a vehicle section, Niobe drives while Ghost rides shotgun. There are dozens of levels filled with challenging encounters to beat here. For the most part, you'll engage in combat with security forces and police, either in hand-to-hand combat or in shootouts. The combat is actually a little shallow, as by and large you'll only ever see around 10 combat moves in the entirety of the game, and shooting is no better as it takes anywhere from 3 to 10 rounds of ammo to take out your enemies, depending on the weapon and of course enemy type. Locking on is automatic, though you can enter first person mode for greater accuracy, but you can't move forward while aiming, and to make matters worse, the game suffers from terrible mouse acceleration and smoothing, neither of which can be turned off. Neither protagonist has particularly great endurance either, as ambushes can actually catch you off guard and get you killed. Luckily, the game is helped by its fairly good level design. Each level is comprised of around half a dozen encounters with a few enemies, separated by environmental navigation, giving you just enough time to take a breather without letting the game get boring. The driving sections can get a little annoying thanks to horribly stiff control, but they're few and far between, so it's not much of an issue. If the gameplay sounds shallow, well, that's because to a certain extent it is, but the game is saved by two things: the focus system and the atmosphere. Focus is basically slow motion, and it allows you to dodge bullets, enhances your effectiveness in combat, and makes you run faster and jump higher. The focus bar can be emptied fairly quickly, and while it does recharge automatically after a few moments, you can also regain some focus by defeating a few grunts in hand-to-hand combat, allowing for a truly breakneck pace. Health kits are pretty rare, but at least on the normal difficulty, health recharge is fast enough that it doesn't become too much of a problem. One thing to keep in mind is the cover system. Ghost and Niobe will both press their backs into the wall if you press the forward key, and while you can lean out to fire, their inaccuracy makes cover shooting redundant, especially since diving in slow motion typically gives fantastic results. Grenades are also borderline useless thanks to their physics. But if there's one thing Enter the Matrix really nails, it's the atmosphere. The soundtrack does a fantastic job at getting the adrenaline pumping, the sound effects are spotless, and the voice actors from the movie actually take on their respective roles in the game, lending it a certain authenticity. The only thing about the sound that could have used some work is the editing, as there are sections with awkward silence, and also some levels where the game changes tracks a bit too frequently and suddenly. Visually, the game is somewhat hit and miss. Most models are perfect recreations, but the animation and eyes can look a bit off at times. Cinematics are highly inconsistent, with one late cutscene in particular looking like an early pitch render. The settings used, while mostly recreated well, are bland locations, with the only exception being the chateau. Still, the game does support 60 FPS and for the most part looks at the very least adequate. Enter the Matrix is a great game thanks to its atmosphere and style, but more discerning gamers are likely to come away disappointed, likely due to the game's imprecise and fiddly controls and somewhat lacking polish. However, everyone else, particularly Matrix fans, should not miss the opportunity to jack in. Currently, used copies can go for as low as 1 cent, and the game runs quite well on Windows 7, making it a no-brainer for anyone that wants to enter the Matrix.